So, I just finished Mysteria Ecclesiae, which is apparently the final DLC for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and I've got some thoughts. This is the big story expansion everyone's been waiting for, right? The one that's supposed to be all killer, no filler, after the first two DLCs were kind of, I don't know, fine, but not exactly groundbreaking. And look, I'm gonna cut right to it because this is important. If you love the base game, the DLC is probably exactly what you wanted. But there's also some stuff you need to know before you jump in, including a pretty nasty bug that cost me about 2 hours of progress. So let's talk about it. So first things first, how do you even access this thing? You need to get to Kutenberg, which is the second major region in the game. And once you've done some of the introductory stuff there, a quest will pop up in the city that kicks off the DLC. And here's something cool that I appreciated. If you're already finished with the main story, there's actually different dialogue that reflects that. Henry will reference events from the ending, which I thought was a nice touch. Makes it feel more like an epilogue if you play it post-game, which honestly I would recommend doing. Although you can absolutely start it earlier if you want. Now here's the deal with the story setup, and I'm not gonna spoil anything major, but you do need to understand what you're getting into. Henry gets hired to escort a physician to Sedlec Monastery, which has been this locked-off area that you couldn't visit before. The doctor wants to visit King Wenceslas, who's imprisoned, to check on his health, but because of all the political stuff happening in the background, that's complicated. So he's going to the monastery to get the abbot's blessing first, since the abbot is close to King Sigismund. Pretty straightforward escort mission, right? Well, no. Not exactly. As soon as you arrive at the monastery, things go sideways pretty much immediately. People are dropping dead from what seems like plague, but the symptoms don't quite match up. And this is where the DLC really starts. You're basically thrown into this murder mystery / disease investigation, and honestly, it's probably the most interesting story of all three DLCs by a wide margin. This is the one that actually feels like a proper expansion with a meaty narrative, not just a decent side quest or some crafting mechanics bolted on. And this is where things get interesting from a gameplay perspective. The monastery goes into quarantine early on, which means you're locked in until you solve this mystery. You cannot leave. Now, I know that might sound restrictive, and I felt that way as well at first. But it's actually not a problem at all because this area is surprisingly massive. There's the main monastery building, underground areas, courtyards, construction site, training ground where some German knights are hanging out, and you can practice combat with them. There's just a ton to explore and a bunch of NPCs to talk to. It really does feel like its own self-contained map. But here's the thing that I think makes this DLC really stand out. When you arrive at the monastery, they take your weapons and armor. Which makes sense, it's a monastery, you're not supposed to be armed. But so, if you want a weapon during the story, you gotta get creative. And on top of that, there's a lot of situations where you just can't brute force your way through with combat. You need to use stealth, you need to use persuasion, you need to use scholarship, and I'm not just saying that as a friendly suggestion. The DLC really does push you towards those playstyles, especially early on. So here's my recommendation. Before you start this, make sure you've got at least decent skills in stealth and scholarship. And some form of persuasion can help too. You can technically do it without those skills, but you're gonna have a much rougher time needlessly. I actually played through this on a character with some pretty rough perks, and even then I found myself relying heavily on stealth and investigation rather than just fighting my way through everything. And I kind of love that. It forced me to engage with systems that I would have probably otherwise ignored, and it gave me that feeling of progression again, even though my character was already pretty powerful going in. The story itself runs about 6 to 8 hours for most people if you're just doing the main quest. But if you're exploring and doing side content, which there's a decent amount of, you're looking at closer to 9 or 10 hours. And that's all quality content, by the way. There really is no filler fetch quests or repetitive busy work like Legacy of the Forge had. This is all story-driven investigation with actual weight to it. Now, in terms of rewards, there's a new sword, a new armor set, and this kind of cool, unique Plague Doctor mask. Now, it doesn't have the iconic beak that you might expect, but functionally, it's really useful. Since you are investigating a disease, there's a risk of Henry getting infected in certain situations, which makes sense. So you can actually go through the steps to craft this mask, which prevents you from catching the illness. I thought that was a neat touch. And there's also new potion recipes that you'll find, and these are not just one-off quest items. They're actually useful beyond the DLC. Like there's an anti-inflammatory potion that gives you buffs to strength and agility plus extra experience gain, which is handy for any build. The monastery also has this massive library and scriptorium that's just packed with skill books and lore. And if you're someone who likes the scholarship system in this game, you're gonna be very happy. Tons of reading materials to boost your stats and learn more about the world. Now, I do want to talk about something that I really appreciated from a quality of life standpoint. Remember how I said they take your weapons and armor when you enter? Well, when you finish the DLC, when you leave the monastery, the game actually asks you if you want to keep your current loadout or switch back to what you had when you entered. And given that you're in this DLC for 6+ hours at least, and you've probably equipped a bunch of new stuff, I was worried I'd have to manually sort through everything. But they thought of that, and I really appreciate it. It's a small detail that saves players a huge headache. Okay, so that's the good stuff. And there's a lot of good stuff here. But I need to also talk about the problems, because there are some real issues you need to know about. The big one, and I mean the big one, is that I encountered my first game-breaking bug in Kingdom Come 2, ever. And it's something that could easily happen to you as well. So here's what went down. During the quarantine, there are areas of the monastery that Henry is not supposed to be in. If a guard spots you, they'll yell at you and escort you out. Now that's fair enough, but I knocked out a guard so I could investigate the area without being bothered, and somehow this made me wanted, even though nobody saw me do it, like there was literally no one around. Now, being wanted was annoying in and of itself, but not the end of the world. I figured it would fade over time, or the story would somehow resolve it, so I just kept playing and avoiding guards whenever I could. The problem is, my wanted status never went away. It stuck around through hours of story progress, and eventually, I hit a quest objective that required me to report to the guard camp to pick up an item. And you can imagine how that went. The guard saw me, and instant game over. I had no choice but to reload a save from about 2 hours earlier before I knocked out that first guard. So my advice is, if you become wanted in the monastery for any reason, just reload immediately. Do not try to push through it like I did. Just reload and avoid whatever triggered it. Save yourself trouble, because this bug is apparently still in the game and it can absolutely break your entire playthrough of the DLC. Another issue I had is smaller, but it's kind of weird. So they take your weapons and armor when you enter the monastery, which again makes sense, but they also take all your crafting materials, like all your herbs, all your flowers for potions, everything. At the same time, you keep your lockpicks, you keep your poisons, you keep your alcohol, which, I mean, why would a monastery let you keep lockpicks and poison but take away your flowers? Like, it felt like a really arbitrary way to create some early quest objectives where you have to go pick herbs. And while I do get that they wanted to give you that scrounging feeling, it just didn't make logical sense to me. Like, there's even an NPC who offers to smuggle you lockpicks if you help him out, but I already had like 70 lockpicks in my inventory because they weren't taken away, so that whole interaction was pointless. That's a pretty minor gripe though, honestly. The inventory thing is more of a, that's really weird, more than an actual problem. Overall though, despite that nasty bug I talked about, I genuinely think that this is the best DLC of the three by a significant margin. Brushes with Death was fine, just kind of a decent side quest that blended in with the base game. Legacy of the Forge had some cool ideas with the building and crafting stuff, but it was light on story and heavy on repetitive activities. Mysteria Ecclesiae though, this is a proper story expansion. It's got multiple endings, it's got real choices with consequences, and it's got characters you actually remember. And if you play it post-game like I did, Henry makes references to the main story events, which makes it feel like a genuine epilogue to the game. It's also worth mentioning that this DLC apparently marks the end of planned content for Kingdom Come 2. And if that's true, if this really is Henry's last adventure, I think they ended on a high note. This was the DLC people were asking for. The story-heavy, ambitious expansion that feels like it respects your time and gives you something substantial to dig into. So if you're wondering whether you should get it, I do recommend getting it. I think it's absolutely worth it. Just go in prepared with the right skills, save often, and avoid getting yourself wanted by the guards. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with this one. If you loved Kingdom Come 2, you're probably gonna love this DLC. It's exactly what it needed to be. Strong story, tons of content, proper expansion-sized scope. Just watch out for that bug and you should have a great time. If you've made it this far, I would really appreciate it if you consider hitting that subscribe button. I'm trying to make it as a full-time YouTuber and it helps a lot. Thank you for watching.